Hi, this is the Tiny Movie, and today I recap a crime drama thriller, Nightmare Alley. Come and join me.
Stan Carlisle begins the movie by dragging a body through his home's floorboards, and then lighting a match to set the entire house on fire. He then gets on a bus that brings him to a carnival. He stands there watching while Clem Hotley, the troupe's leader, introduces a geek to the crowd. In front of an amused audience, the guy is described as is it a man or a beast? To the shock and amusement of the crowd, Clem drops a live chicken down as the geek appears and bites the chicken's head off. Other carnies, including the world's strongest man Bruno, and the world's tiniest man, Major Mosquito, suspect Stan of wrongdoing, but Stan ends up working for them as a carny to help them load out faster. After proving his worth, Clem invites Stan to join them as they travel to another carnival. Stan begins to having feelings for one of the carnies, Molly Cahill, whose act is allowing electrical charges to pass through her body. Bruno urges Stan not to hurt her because he promised her father he would protect her, and he scares Stan with violence if he does. At one point, the beast geek flees from his cage, and Stan and Clem have to look for him. The geek hits Stan over the head with a rock, and Stan hits back by throwing him down and hitting him over the head, but Clem stops him from killing the man. The next morning, Stan meets fellow carny Zena and her husband Pete, whose act is being a clairvoyant to the guests. Stan stays with them, take a bath, which leads to Zena have an affair with Stan after Pete goes outside. Stan later assists them with their performance, in which Zena pretends to be a medium between herself and the customers. Zena had to improvise after Pete misses a cue due to his heavy drinking, but she succeeds to convince the crowd to cheer for her. Meanwhile, Stan is working on a gimmick for Molly that involves her being strapped to an electric chair and letting him join her act. Stan likes to spend time with Clem. He shows him his liquor collection but warns him about drinking the toxic wood alcohol. After driving the geek to the hospital for treatment, Clem tells Stan about how a man becomes a geek after being broken and left with nothing to his name. He also shows Stan a collection of strange objects he has, including a fetus with a third eye that murdered its mother during birthing. In Zena House, Stan picks up several tricks from Zena and Pete. When Pete shows his skills on clairvoyant and exposing hidden objects, he hinting Stan by telling him his need for his late father's love. It hits Stan because of his troubled connection with his father, although Pete claims that this is just a normal trick based on word coding game. Stan is warned by Zena and Pete if he want to learn the game should not to put on a spook show in which he try to channel the dead. At night, Stan gets Pete some vodka, as per his request, and tries to steal Pete's little black book of tricks while he pretends to be unconscious. But Pete catches him but forgives. In the morning, Bruno and Major go to Zena to notify her what happened to Pete. Everyone dashes to the middle of the field, where they discover Pete, who has been poisoned, though it's unclear if Stan gave him the wood alcohol on accident or on purpose. Anyway, on top of him, Zena crying for the loss of her old friend and companion. Days passes. One night, the sheriff with a backup team raids the carnival and shows them the warrant for closing the carnival because of illegal performance, emphasizing cruel to both animal and man, and want to arrest Molly for indecency. But Stan arrives and saves the carnival using his cold reading skills to convince the sheriff not to close it. Later that night, Molly persuaded by Stan to leave the carnival and run away with him as they feel their relationship is growing despite Molly past reluctant. Minutes later, Bruno discovers them kissing and starts hitting Stan, but Molly holds him off and tells him she loves him and has agreed to go with him. Next morning, Stan says his goodbyes to Zena on their last day together. He offers her Pete's book, but she declines to take it. 2 years passes. Stan and Molly had put together a show in New York as the Great Stanton. He wears a blindfold and uses specific signs to guess what Molly is holding. Dr. Lilith Ritter, a psychotherapist, visits them during one of the shows. She decides to do the act with Stan, challenging him to guess what object is being held by her. After a pause, Stan correctly predicts that she is carrying a pistol. The audience applauds, but Stan doesn't stop, and continually reveals things about Lilith's personal life which is true. Minutes later, after Stan is leaving, Judge Charles Kimball, who hired Lilith to determine if Stan was the real one who he was looking for, was waiting outside and asked Stan to do a private consultation for him. Stan accepts and promises to channeling Kimball's late son Julian to him for his solace, which Molly declines. Kimball offers to pay Stan generously, and Stan can't refuse the offer. Stan pays a visit to Kimball and his wife at their home later that day. He discovers Julian's death in no man's land and claims to sense his presence, which leads to Kimball and his team be convinced of Stan's gifts. Later, Stan visits Lilith at her office. She's aware that he is a scam artist, but she is attracted by his skills and intends to assist him in exploiting New York's elite, since she has recorded numerous sessions with them full of their personal life details. Lilith also begins therapy sessions with Stan, learning of his guilt in Pete's death because he considered him as a substitute father figure. It's revealed that Stan was also around during his father's final moments when he made him freeze to death before dumping his body in the house and lighting it on fire. Molly is no longer knows that greedy Stan. She missed her old days, so calls Bruno, who arrives with Major and Xena to visit her later that night. Stan comes and meets his old friends and consults with Xena, who cautions him against getting involved in the ghost show. The next day, Stan meets with Kimball at Lilith's suggestion and is introduced to Ezra Grindle, a wealthy man who wishes to talk with his late wife Dory, who died after a miscarriage. Stan meets Grindle and his loyal assistant, Anderson. There, he is taken to a lie detector test. He's almost exposed as a liar when questioned about being a medium, until he gets to make statements about Dory, which convinces Grindle that he's who he claims to be. Stan, with more confidence than ever, begins an affair with Lilith and starts drinking in her office, all in days while he's defrauding Grindle. In his home, lonely homesick Molly discovers the affair and leaves a note for him she's leaving him. But Stan follows her to the train station and begs her to stay, which Molly accepts. Mrs. Kimball has gone insane at the Kimball house, believing that she would be reunited with Julian because of what Stan told her. She kills her husband and then turns the pistol on herself. In Grindle's house, he hopes to see Dory again, so Stan plots to stage a seance with Molly, who, based on a sketch he saw, resembles Dory. Molly is totally disagree with the plan, but Stan assures her this is the last one. Stan meets Grindle in the cemetery, where he confesses to Stan that he has abused women in the past and that he is responsible for Dory's death. Based on the plan, Molly puts on her costume and covers herself with fake blood and waits for Grindle to come to appear. Grindle comes with Stan, shocked seeing Dory. He was supposed to see the ghost in distant, and Stan doesn't expect he gets approached to Molly. Grindle got closer and hugs Molly, and she tries to back away. Grindle realizes he'd been deceived, so he loses his cool and slaps Molly before threatening Stan. Then he cries out Anderson for help. Stan hits back by punching Grindle repeatedly to death, breaking his nose clean off in the end. Anderson reaches him, but Stan and Molly can drive away. Anderson comes to the door, but Stan runs him over twice, killing him. After they escape, Molly leaves Stan for good. Stan returns to Lilith's office, where she reveals that she was defrauding him and stealing all of Grindle's money he was collecting. She shoots Stan in the ear, then calls the cops when he attacks her. Stan runs to a train before being arrested. Several years pass. Stan is now broke, homeless and alcoholic, and lives among beggars. He eventually arrives at another carnival. He decides to start over and goes to talk with the boss. He smells so bad that the boss hardly stands him in his room. Stan offers to perform the clairvoyant act, but the boss declines as he believes it's outdated. Instead, he's offered a drink and a job as the new geek by the boss. Stan says that he was born for it, and he starts laughing through his weeping. And the movie ends.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more video like this.